reported that we were on target to have one of the best economic development years in my personal recollection. Our financial outlook looked good. We had several of our manufacturers that had expansions on the horizon. We were excited for some large city capital projects that we had planned for last year. And then, of course, COVID hit. And then we didn't know quite what we were in for. Like many of you, we pulled back on our many expenditures and projects, basically to those that were essential. Manpower was pulled off to do other jobs. Our administration was stretched as we devoted time and energy to new practices, procedures, safety measures, and so forth. Literally every day was a new day. And like you, we found that we needed to adapt very quickly. But through it all, we had two main objectives. And the first objective was to ensure the safety of our employees and also our residents. And then secondly, we were very interested and concerned about the continuity of services. Obviously, we provide multiple essential services that are very needful. And, our safety services, electric, water, sewer, sanitation, communications, and many more. And we wanted to ensure that there was no disruption in those services. We discovered new ways to be able to provide those services. To give you an example, who would have ever guessed that we would have our senior citizens that would be participating in Zoom meetings virtually. That was something that was not on our radar screen a year ago, but we certainly are doing that now. Well, later we did recognize that we needed to provide additional services for our residents and businesses. And we did that in a variety of ways. And here on the screen are some of those ways that we were able to do that. The first thing that we did is we recognized that we were the recipient of a lot of information from the federal government, from the state, and even the county. And we needed to make some sort of a one-stop shop for our businesses and our residences to be able to get information about loans and grants and various resources, job opportunities, and so forth. So we have done, I think, a very good job of making sure that we are able to get that information out to the public. And so we did that on a dedicated web page, and of course we utilized social media and other means to get that out. We developed other initiatives such as Wadsworth Eats, obviously for our local restaurants, Wadsworth Shops for our retailers. We had Shop Wadsworth Local. We assisted our restaurants with reopenings after, of course, they went through closing last summer. We worked with temporary seating for them. We did various surveys. We did a survey for our businesses for us to be able to have an idea of what you all were going through and how we could help you best. We participated in a variety of programs, such as a small business grant program. This was generously provided through the county, utilizing their CARES Act funding. And our job was to make sure that as many Wadsworth businesses as possible were able to benefit from that assistance. And we were very grateful that 70 of our small businesses and nonprofits were able to receive upwards of $600,000 in that program. We developed our own utility assistance program for businesses and individuals. Robert's going to talk about that more, but that was another assistance that we did. We did several mass distributions for businesses and individuals and our senior citizens. We collaborated with many of you, and thank you to each of you because many of you had a hand in this. So for example, we did the Business Outreach Initiative with the Chamber and with Main Street. We worked with the library on the Wadsworth Knows How initiative. We worked with the American Legion and A1 Sports on the flags that were distributed on 76 and High Overpass, not only as a display of patriotism, but also just as a ray of hope during a fairly unusual time. And we worked with many organizations, churches, businesses, families, and individuals. And I would be remiss if I did not say thank you to each and every one of you, because it seems like when there was a need that was made aware, somebody rose their hand and said, let me take care of that. Individuals, they would make masks, they would sew masks, they would shop for our senior citizens, they donated food and goods, they made up pop-up pantries. And so everybody did their part to help alleviate as much stress as possible during this time. Next slide, please. There were many COVID impacts, and I think the first thing that everybody thinks of is what's the financial impact. And so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time to discuss a little bit about that as far as how it affected the city. As you might guess, one of the major sources of revenue for the city is our income tax. And prior to COVID, we'd actually been experiencing some record months. Our revenue was doing very well in the income tax category. And then COVID hit. And once again, we did not know quite what we were in for. And there were some that were projecting that municipalities would have a reduction of 20% of their revenue into their income tax. And so, of course, we were very watchful over the next several months. And I will tell you, we were very happy because we ended up the year with positive 1%. And so it could have been much worse. And I wouldn't say that was a banner year, but we will certainly take it. That was wonderful. Other revenue sources that we had were fairly flat. We did have reduced revenue in our investment income, basically due to the reduction in income in interest rates at that time. One of our largest sources of revenue is through our utilities, and Robert will speak more to this in the future. But basically, it is reflective of reduction of usage in commercial as well as our industrial users, but it also reflected an increase in our residential users. There was a lot of people that were working from home at this time. We did receive $1.6 million in CARES Act funding. This was to reimburse for various COVID-related expenses as well as personnel that was dedicated to COVID issues, and also to help with our utility assistance program and a few other things. So due to the reduction of the expenses that we made, due to very careful planning, the positive income tax that I'd mentioned, a little bit of the CARES Act, putting all that up together, we were actually able to add to our general fund $1.2 million. Which we were very, very pleased with. As I said, we were very watchful and very cautious during this time. But because of that cautiousness, we were able to end the year very well in our general fund. As far as budgeting for 2021, we budgeted fairly consistent with what we do other years. But I will say that we're being very cautious and very mindful and watching things on a month-by-month basis and assessing things on a quarterly basis. Because we recognize that there are many impacts from COVID. We're still in the middle of it. And we recognize that there are still impacts to be had. Next slide, please. Well, COVID has certainly impacted our business climate. And I thought I'd touch base a little bit on unemployment. Unemployment in Medina County prior to COVID, I would say was around 4%. And in 1 week, and this slide shows this, when the shutdown basically occurred, the unemployment claim just skyrocketed. And over time, week by week, that has been coming down. We're not quite to pre-COVID times, but we're getting there. And so it's been very refreshing with that. All I can say, though, is that Wadsworth is hiring. We know that we're growing in the job area. We often help our businesses when there is a fair amount to be a position to be filled. We'll do our best to help get the word out. And so we're aware of at least 4 of our major manufacturers that have a need to hire. And over the last several weeks, we've been made known of over 130 positions, total positions. And I'm sure some of those have been satisfied by now, but that does give you an indication that Wadsworth is hiring. Next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about the capital investment that's going on this past year. Even though we had a pandemic going on, we had a lot of investment, over 30 projects, $21 million of capital investment. Believe it or not, we had 11 new businesses open up this past year. I got to tell you, it takes a lot of tenacity and grit to be willing and to open up a business in the middle of a pandemic. And from these pictures, you can tell that these are businesses that we have all grown to love and are very appreciative of, and have become a wonderful addition to Wadsworth. We had 10 of our downtown businesses receive a downtown improvement grant. Downtown Wadsworth, or Main Street Wadsworth, actually administered this grant that was made available through Heritage Foundation. And that grant that was from Heritage was matched by the city, and then it was also matched by either the business or the building owner that was doing the work. And as you can see, they've made a really great improvement in some of these before and after pictures. All told, there was a total of over $80,000 that was invested in these improvements. And so very grateful for those that were willing to put investment during a very difficult year. We also had some investment going on in some of our major manufacturers. Rohr Corporation chose Wadsworth for its first Center of Excellence. This is an expansion project that added an additional 20% to their building and increased their manufacturing footprint to over 200,000 square foot. This project actually was completed in September of 2020, and it was really a wonderful project. It was a $13.6 million investment in both expansion as well as equipment. And they actually recently put in another $1.5 million in plant improvements. This project retained 242 jobs, and then they actually added an additional 60 new full-time positions that will be added in a very short period of time. So it was a wonderful project. We had other of our major manufacturers that also made substantial investments. Radici Plastics, Clampco, Goldsmith and Eggleton, each of them investing in equipment or investing in their facility. We're very grateful for that. Another project is Santee Landing. I don't know if you've read about them in the paper, but it's a 45-unit affordable family housing development. This is a $10 million project, and they are slated to be completed towards September this year. We have a lot on the schedule for in the coming year. Advanced Plastics is an existing business that we have here in town. They have outgrown their present facility, and they are going to be building a $2.1 million facility on Corporate Parkway. And they are hoping to start that project in April. And that project will create an additional 10 full-time positions as well as 3 part-time positions. And so we're excited for that project to get started. We're also aware of a couple other of our major manufacturers that are planning expansions. It's a little premature to be able to announce those companies, but nonetheless, it shows that we have some nice investments going on this year in the city of Wadsworth. We do have a little bit going on in our commercial activity as well. You might have read that we have some new ownership for a portion of Wadsworth Crossings. Recently, a lease was signed and announced that retailer Five Below will be locating in the Wadsworth Crossings area. And Planning Commission just approved an outlot in front of Lowe's, and that's where a new Jiffy Lube will be built before too long. So in spite of the pandemic, Wadsworth certainly has a lot going on. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Service Director Robert Patrick.
Very much, Mayor. And you said it's interesting joining everyone here on Zoom and giving a presentation in this manner. Look forward to seeing everyone in person here soon. This photo seemed like a fitting introduction to public service this year. Last week when we put the presentation together after the cold month we've had, but seeing Tom in a t-shirt down in the square, maybe we should have updated that picture. But this picture also is reminiscent to me of something that I commonly witness, and that's things that others may not see. The situation in which our workforce is providing some service while others are at home or like most of you at your place of business. Sometimes when the world is sleeping or enjoying a holiday, our folks are always on demand and step up to meet the occasion, as the mayor had mentioned. And the past year has been no different. As we were faced with the 100-year pandemic, many stringent protocols were put in place by us, but followed through and put into place by all of our employees. There was no lack of heroism in any of the areas, in the face of challenge as our folks work diligently to modify their daily lives and continue services. We did not have any lack of critical services, as the mayor mentioned, and that we're very proud of. Folks displayed courage, dedication, and appreciation throughout. There were hardly any complaints, even though folks had to work 12-hour shifts continuously without any days off to keep the water going, or mow in the parks after increased usage while everyone wanted to get out of their house, or going into homes and businesses provided much needed cable and internet service. So folks like all of us right now could communicate to the outside world between each other and receive important updates. So the job that our folks did and continue to do should make all of you proud of our hometown services that we're able to provide. Taking a little look at more in depth on COVID response, as the mayor mentioned, we were very much in tune with the financial indicators, forecasting of revenues and monitoring these to react appropriately. When we were in charge of almost $50 million worth of operations, this was never as imperative as it was last year to do this around the clock, as we were also creating the policies, procedures, and reacting to the different directives that we had to work under. We monitored the utility revenues closer than ever before, and don't be too concerned with the details and the numbers there, but we had mixed results across the board. We had decreases in electric usage, and as the mayor mentioned, we track those by different sectors, but we had increases in water, sewer, internet, and sanitation. I'm proud to say that CityLink was able to work closely with customers and, upon request from Superintendent Dr. Andy Hill, help students and teachers either get connected or provide increased bandwidth to help them continue the excellent education that our community receives. Our utility billing department sent over 180,000 bills last year and seen many fluctuations in receivables, which was a great concern of our business as it is with all of yours. We tried to balance the aspect of running successful enterprises, but yet being caring and supportive as a community and as a city to our residents and businesses in need. We decided to do some things that the mayor mentioned. We also withheld charging late fees until the middle of the summer, not shutting off utility services. And as I mentioned, that program to get folks connected or stay connected through the internet. And the mayor mentioned that we also became one of only a couple communities in the state to provide a utility assistance program. That program was utilized through the CARES dollars, and it was supported by City Council. And through that, we were able to help almost 200 residents and businesses with up to $500 off of relief of past due bills. This was done just before the winter season in order to help those get ahead, as it's an easy time to fall back and then provide some joy for the holidays. So we utilized over $82,000 of funds for this program, and it also was able to help our nonprofit entities to allow their assistance and their resources to go further. Moving on, as we worked through the pandemic, as services continue without delay, there were some projects that were delayed or postponed due to financial uncertainty. Here are two projects I spoke a great deal of last year at the State of the City. The downtown infrastructure project was ready to go out for advertisement for engineering firms to start the detailed design phase, but we held back right as the pandemic began in March. If you recall, we finished over a year's worth of work of preliminary design and community engagement at the end of January and decided to move forward with over a year's worth of the detailed design work. So even though those conceptual renderings look complete, there's a lot of detail that needs to be done to know exactly where the underground utility lines are going to go, how big they need to be, how wide the streets and sidewalks and turn lanes need to be, and then the materials that we'll use to replace those items. So we expect this phase to last over a year before we can even think about putting shovels in the ground and beginning construction. So right now, I estimate that we're almost 2 calendar years out for construction, even if we were to start beginning the process right now. There's a lot of other things we need to go through before we get to construction. We'll continue to discuss this with City Council, and when the time is right to move forward with that engineering phase, we'll be ready to go. So then we'll be ready to construct the project when things turn around. The Southwest parking lot was delayed due to the cost of the project, but also because there were costs associated with relocation of some utilities that needed to be borne by building owners, and there was a final property to be acquired. Again, we're all set to get going with those final preparations when COVID hit last year, so we're gearing up to do that project this year. Although these projects and some other smaller projects were held up, there were a number of projects that continue to move forward in the city and upgrade our aging infrastructure. Moving on to the next slide, the Valley View Baker Improvement Project was moved forward with later in the year than anticipated, but completed earlier this month. The $800,000 project entailed installing a new water line, along with storm sewer lines and sanitary sewer repairs. The finishing work, such as the trees and the grass and the grading and some road repairs, will be completed when the weather allows this spring. Our airport received new pavement on the east-west runway in the fall. And as you see here at the ribbon cutting, Mayor Robin Lawbaugh was flanked by, to the left by Airport Operations Group Nick Bellaruto, and to the right, Secretary of State Frank LaRose. After the ribbon cutting, the Secretary participated in a flight to honor frontline heroes battling COVID. They flew over many area hospitals and care centers, including those here in town. That project was almost $250,000 and funded 90% by the State of Ohio Department of Aviation. We want to definitely thank them for their support and our asset to the community. Continuing down in that southwest quadrant of the city, the Seville Road Culvert project, as you can see in this time-lapse video, was completed under a month. But for your viewing pleasure, it'll take 1 minute. The project was over $400,000 with engineering, and it replaced the over 50-year-old culverts that you can see, as well as water line and sewer line improvements in the area. The new culverts should last well beyond the 50 years of the old one, and was an area concern which was compounded by the flooding at Holmesburg Creek a couple years ago. The project was funded by a large portion of Ohio Public Works Commission dollars, and we're grateful for that funding as well. This project improved the creek flow as well, and was important to take care of due to the amount of traffic in the area, and obviously the large trucks from our industrial sector. Our engineering department did a great job managing this project, as well as all the other projects that I had mentioned. And as we have a few seconds left here in the video, I will go ahead and give you, oops, out of time. It's going to give you some other updates. Moving on to the next slide, the Rittman Road solar field was completed last spring and put in operation in May. Last year, we talked about the Seville Road project. Those two projects were completed by American Municipal Power and NextEra Energy. After those projects were complete, they combined to produce enough power to electrify a quarter of the city on an average day. This power is not only sustainable, but it's also low cost option due to the fact that it's inside our city limits. So it reduces our fees we have to go to pay to get our power from outside the city delivered here. You probably heard me, like last year, many complaining about these costs, how they skyrocketed to over a third of our power supply over the last couple years, from almost 10, 12% about 8 years ago. As mentioned last year, you can now log into our website and see interactive and live data on the production of both of those facilities. So I want to give you a quick glance into that. From our website, under the projects page, you can view both the facilities. You can see the Rittman Road site, once we pull that up, is producing power as we speak. Nice sunny days like today obviously are better for that. But there you can see the production to today. You can see obviously as soon as sun rises, that starts to ramp up, and then a real steep curve until we get to the peak of the day. That'll keep going up until our peak this time of year around 2 or 3 o'clock, and then start to tail off. If we go to a 5-day view, you can see the production over the last week, the last 5 days, and you can see how it's been impacted by weather. So while we're getting that up, I'll mention on the left side, you can see some kind of overall numbers, and on the right side, you can see some comparisons to the production that solar field is equivalent to in other forms. So again, over the last week, you can see really weather dependent. We had a large amount of snow that covered those panels, but once those panels started to melt off the last couple of days with the sun, you can see that production increase. If we go to a month view, you can see over the past month, again, how that fluctuation has been caused. And then if we go to a year view, you can see the production we've had since last May when it was put into place. So take a look at that on your own time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Speaking of Okay, let's get the presentation back. That project definitely contributes to the success of the city and our assets. Speaking of other success, we had a great street improvement program last year, albeit delayed a little bit due to the financial uncertainties. We were able to award and take advantage of low pricing in the spring. You can see right there from the picture, Sunset Street and Lyman Street on the right. And then the next slide, you can see a look at all the streets we've been able to do in just the last 5 years due to the success of that 0.1% income tax that was put in place back in 2012. That 10-year income tax has allowed us to pave more than 5 times the amount of streets that we used to do in any given year prior to that. So we'll be talking about that later this year and renewing that in order to keep the momentum moving forward. But on the right side, you can see this year's program highlighted by Crestwood Avenue, north of Akron Road, East View, Falk Avenue from Highland to Donor, Reams Court, First Street, Oakwood Avenue, Johnson Road, Leatherman Road from College to 76, Kyle Street, Seville Road, and in Seville from Plum to 94. We're also going to take part in the county program that will complete Leatherman Road from 76 up to Reimer Road, east of State, and then Hartman Road. In Hartman, that's all the way from Broad Street all the way up to Reimer Road. So we have some matching dollars into that program. So there's going to be a lot of work this year, hopefully this summer when the weather's good and we can continue to improve the quality of the roads due to that 0.1% income tax. Lastly, we're excited to talk about much needed improvements to 2 of our oldest and most used parks in town. We applied early last year for funding in the state's capital budget, and due to COVID, that was delayed. But we received word just before the end of the year that that was included in the state's capital budget. So these improvements will be to Memorial and Durling Park. In total, we received $550,000 of funds, and able to secure that for the project. It's going to cost over $1 million. Would like to thank the state and especially former Senator Obhoff and Representative Hamley for supporting this initiative. We'll look forward to start planning the process this year and come up with a schedule completion over the next coming couple years. And we'll have some renderings that everyone can take a look at, similar to the one on the bottom right corner of the screen. That's not a rendering that we have put together for us, but something similar to that. And you can look forward to aging features to be improved and replaced, such as Kaleidoscope Playground, new tennis courts, a new memorial, pavement, walking trails, pavilions, restrooms, updates to the baseball, softball fields. So we're very excited to receive this funding. I know the community is going to be very happy when these facelifts are able to complete and ensure that these parks age well into the future. So that's all I had. I will graciously have the opportunity to pass off to Safety Director Matt Hiscock. Not only is he a humorous individual, if you know him, but a more than qualified and humbled leader in our community. It is definitely a pleasure to work for him or with him and work with the mayor on a daily basis. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my amazing wife for all of her love and support over this past year, especially going through the pandemic together. So that's all, and now I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Robert, and thanks for those kind comments. The check is in the mail, so I appreciate that. A big thank you to the Chamber for welcoming all of us today. For those of you who don't know me or can't recognize me with my additional pandemic face weight, I'm Matt Hiscock, the city's Director of Public Safety. Before I get started, I thought it would be appropriate that I did want to share just a personal pandemic growth experience that I had. Like some folks, I've used some of my additional time at home to exercise my mind by trying my hand at more puzzles. And well, I didn't want to brag, especially in front of Dr. Hill, but I've been finishing many of those puzzles in just a couple hours, despite the boxes saying 2 to 4 years. So that's an oldie but a goodie. I love using it when I have a chance. So thanks for bearing with me. Let me start with staffing. As I've always said, the provision of quality public safety services starts with the quality of the people who provide those services. In 2020, we welcomed several new staff members, including police officers Rachel Durbin, who had actually served our community as an emergency dispatcher before becoming a police officer, and Luke Yainert, a Medina resident who was a decorated U.S. Army veteran. We also added a emergency dispatcher by the name of Courtney Weiss due to some vacancies we had in that round. 2020, the police department awarded Officer Seth Pettit our Officer of the Year award. Great efforts all year long, and the award is really well deserved for all the things that Seth does. Some people may not know Seth because he's more commonly known as Zorro's partner. So our most popular officer being the canine officer, of course. Social justice and modern policing was certainly an important topic in 2020, in the early parts of 2020, in the wake of national and local media coverage of the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks killings, and the resulting protests and nationwide discussion of human rights and the balances between those and modern policing ensued. We welcomed many folks in our community who began to ask questions about the Wadsworth Police Department's training and operations. Core policing topics that we discussed with many folks included things like de-escalation training, the use of vascular neck restraints, handcuffing techniques and practices, health and safety of those in custody, officers' duties to intercede, the use of deadly force, and the existence of comprehensive use of force policies, investigative policies for employee complaints and misconduct, police officer candidate background and recruitment requirements, basic medical training of police officers, things like awareness of bias-free policing and techniques to ensure that that occurs, the usage of body-worn and in-car camera systems, and emergency telecommunication training. All of those things were discussed with many folks who had good questions about what we do at the Wadsworth Police Department. I'm happy to report that all of those topics were already considered and involved in existing prior operations as well as policies. So it wasn't something that we reacted to after the events of early 2020. I'm proud of its police department and its many years of being a leading agency and following best practice standards in all areas of modern policing. For years, the department has been recognized as a certified law enforcement agency by the state of Ohio and its collaborative community police advisory board. Certainly, as talked about by both the mayor and Mr. Patrick, COVID-19 was an demanding challenge in 2020. In particular, our EMS division has been at the front line of servicing those in our community with emergency COVID-related needs. Of the estimated 2,500 total EMS responses in 2020, approximately 15% of all EMS calls for assistance were COVID or COVID-related concerns. Early on in the pandemic, as has been discussed, with the assistance of our medical control physician and the SUMA health system, the department was able to revise infectious disease protocols, revise procedures to safeguard staff and patients during treatments, and leverage some of the abilities to use CARES Act funding and other Department of Health and Human Service programs to provide for the additional supply and equipment demands created by the pandemic. While the social distancing requirements also impacted community engagement items, the pandemic certainly created challenges for many of the safety forces' planned 2020 events. We were able to provide some award-winning remote programming thanks to the extraordinary efforts of Assistant Fire Chief Potter, firefighter medic Scott Vallant, and school resource officers Adam Innocente and Dan Shunk. We continued the community's long-standing participation in Safety Forces Camp. We also continued programs like the Cops and Kids program, the No Shave November and December fundraising program, and in a partnership with the seemingly tireless efforts of the Medina County Health Department, we participated in several events in support of the Masked Up Medina County campaign. Certainly, as Robert had mentioned, we look forward to more in-person public engagement opportunities in 2021. Fire and EMS. With the consistent growth in call volumes and activities in the fire and EMS departments, it was very evident that those services continue to be vitally important to our municipality and our residents. In September, the EMS department was recognized by the SUMA health system as the Outstanding STEMI Team of the Month for their continued timely life-saving efforts and standard of care practices for all cardiac patients. In 2020, the department also continued with scheduled capital replacements of essential fire apparatus, including the ordering of a frontline replacement fire engine number 3. Additionally, based upon a long existing replacement need in the current failing state of Fire Station Number 1, and pursuant to our 2016 Fire Station Study and Analysis recommendations, the fire department was able to purchase land on College Street here in Wadsworth for the future site of a headquarters fire station. Taking a look ahead, in 2020, it's an extremely important year for police, fire, and EMS. Specifically, not only will we be renegotiating collective bargaining agreements with our workforces and hopefully a new fire and EMS service contract with the township, but also in May, we will have a ballot issue for a 1.5 mil capital fire levy. With continued support of the community and hopeful passage of that fire levy, we will begin the design and construction of the new fire and EMS headquarters station. We plan on replacing the existing emergency radio system and move towards a more digitized MARCS or multi-agency radio system. And finally, we'll complete the specifications and planning for the replacement of the fire department's most expensive piece of apparatus, that being an aerial platform, or what we refer to as Ladder 1. That's just a quick glimpse at public safety aspects in the city. And with that, I look forward to the promise of 2021, and I'll hand it back over to Mayor Lawbaugh.
Thank you to both of you and Service Director Patrick. Just want to close by saying thanks to each and every one of you. As I mentioned, this has been quite a year, but hopefully we were able to show a little bit of even though it's been a very different and a difficult year, we've been able to continue to maintain services and be able to provide what each and every one of you have grown to expect and deserve, but also that what we want to make sure that we carry out. So thanks for having this, for allowing us this opportunity to give you a little bit of an update about what's going on in the city of Wadsworth.